Throughout history, many people have claimed fraudulently to have been displaced monarchs or heirs who had disappeared or supposedly died under mysterious circumstances. Their motivations and backgrounds have varied throughout time. However, their objective is usually to try to gain political, possibly financial, or social advantages as a result of their deception. Many of these impostors have had significant interpersonal problems in their past and did not appear to come from a good life. Following the murder of the Russian imperial family, the House of Romanov, at the hands of a firing squad led by Yakov Yurovsky in Ekaterinburg on the 17th of July 1918, several impostors began to appear in public throughout the 20th century, coming forward claiming to be members of the imperial family who had survived this execution. As a result of this, their lies and deceptions fueled the imagination of the public, with their various stories providing inspiration for numerous books and films. The most prominent of these was Anna Anderson, an impostor who masqueraded as Grand Duchess Anastasia, the youngest daughter of the last Russian Emperor Nicholas II and the Empress Consort Alexandra. Although Anna Anderson had gained the greatest level of support and recognition for her claims from among those who masqueraded as the children of Nicholas II, she was not the most successful impostor to have masqueraded as Russian royalty. In this video, we shall look back to a time more than 3 centuries before the murder of Nicholas II and his family, a time commonly referred to as the Time of Troubles, and an impostor who gathered more than just a broad support, an impostor who managed to deceive his way to Moscow itself, claiming the throne for himself in a bloody coup and ruling as the Tsar of all Russia. This is the story of the first False Dmitry, the impostor Tsar of Russia. Dmitry Ivanovich was the youngest son of Tsar Ivan IV, commonly known as Ivan the Terrible, by his last wife Maria Nagaya, and the only child that they had together. He was born on October 19, 1582, and the marriage of his parents had not been blessed by the Orthodox Church, who considered only 3 consecutive marriages to be legitimate, and Maria was believed to have been at least the 6th wife of Ivan the Terrible. Maria was not at all favored by her husband, who only a year after their marriage in 1581, had made the suggestion to Queen Elizabeth I of England that he would dispose of Maria and take Mary Hastings, a daughter of Francis Hastings, the 2nd Earl of Huntingdon, as his new wife. It is believed that the birth of their son Dmitry was what spared Maria from banishment from Ivan's court. Dmitry shared his name with his father's firstborn son to his first wife Anastasia Romanovna, who had died in infancy back in 1553 at less than a year old. Following the birth of Dmitry, a dimensional icon was painted, which depicts his patron saint, Demetrius of Thessalonica, in whose honor he was baptized. Dmitry was only around 15 months old when his father, Ivan the Terrible, died from a stroke while playing chess in March 1584. Ivan was succeeded by Dmitry's elder half-brother Feodor I, who was the 3rd and last surviving son from Ivan's first marriage to Anastasia Romanovna. Even before Fyodor had his coronation ceremony on the 24th of May that year, Dmitry, and his mother Maria had been exiled to the town of Uglich, situated on the Volga River. The infant Dmitry had been granted an income from the land, which supported both him and his mother, as Maria had not been granted any property in Ivan's will. In Uglich, both mother and son had been placed under the guardianship of the boyars, who were high-ranking members of the feudal nobility. The new Tsar, Feodor I, had never been taken seriously as a candidate until the death of his elder brother Ivan Ivanovich on the 19th of November 1581. Ivan Ivanovich had been the second-born son of Ivan the Terrible and Anastasia Romanovna, and had been the tsarevich and heir to the ivory throne of his father until he was allegedly killed by him in a fit of rage. Ivan Ivanovich's relationship with his father had deteriorated in the years prior to his death, and only days before, on the 14th of November, Ivan the Terrible had subjected his pregnant daughter-in-law Yelena to a violent assault because he did not approve of the clothes she was wearing, with Yelena suffering a miscarriage as a result. Ivan Ivanovich had rushed to his wife's defense and confronted his father on the matter. However, this confrontation, along with the younger Ivan's alleged insubordination in demanding that his father grant him command of troops in the Livonian War, saw the elder Ivan accuse his son of inciting rebellion. Angered, Ivan the Terrible struck his son on the head with his scepter. Ivan's minister, Boris Godunov, who was present at the scene, tried to intervene but received blows himself. The younger Ivan fell, barely conscious and with a bleeding temple. For the next few days, the elder Ivan prayed incessantly for a miracle, but to no avail, and the tsarevich died on the 19th of November 1581. The death of Ivan Ivanovich left Fyodor as the new tsarevich and heir. However, Dmitry Ivanovich would be born less than a year after Ivan the Younger's death. Following the aforementioned death of Ivan the Terrible at his chessboard in March 1584, Fyodor was crowned Tsar and autocrat of all Russia at Dormition Cathedral in Moscow on the 31st of May 1584. Fyodor, however, was only the nominal ruler, as his late father's trusted minister Boris Godunov, who was also his brother-in-law, legitimized himself as Fyodor's regent, as Fyodor was sickly of health and diffident of temperament, and thus perceived as a weak ruler. Godunov's position at the Tsar's court was so significant that overseas diplomats sought an audience with Boris Godunov, as his will was law, and although Fyodor reigned, it was Boris who ruled. As well as this, Fyodor's wife Irina, who was the sister of Boris, reportedly surpassed her spouse in intelligence, education, and sophistication, and she quickly acquired influence over Fyodor, learning to navigate in court affairs. While exiled in Uglich following the accession of his half-brother Fyodor to the throne, the young Dmitry Ivanovich had his own court, and was officially a reigning prince of a principality which had been granted to him as a younger son of a monarch who was not the heir to the throne. However, neither the prince nor his mother received any real rights to the principality, except for receiving a part of the district's income which supported them in the absence of any material assets being left to Maria in her late husband's will. Legitimate power was concentrated in the hands of so-called service people who had been sent from Moscow under the leadership of Mikhail Betsigovsky. The real reason behind Dmitry's exile to Uglich may have been the fear that Dmitry either voluntarily or unwillingly could become the figurehead around which all those dissatisfied with the rule of Tsar Feodor would rally. Giles Fletcher, who was the English ambassador to Russia during Fyodor's reign, commented on the precarious situation the Rurik dynasty now found itself in, where after the Tsar, who had no son, the only remaining male representative of the Moscow line of the Rurik family was the young Dmitry.
The Tsar's younger brother, a child of 6 or 7 years of age, is kept in a remote place from Moscow, under the care of his mother and relatives, but, as is heard, his life is in danger from the attempts of those who extend their sights to the possession of the throne in the event of the childless death of the Tsar. The nurse, who had tasted some food before him, as I have heard, died suddenly. The Russians confirm that he is definitely the son of Tsar Ivan, by the fact that at a young age all the qualities of his father began to be revealed in him. He, it is said, takes pleasure in watching sheep and cattle in general being slaughtered, in seeing throats cut when blood flows from it, whereas children are generally afraid of it, and in beating geese and chickens with a stick until they die.
On the 15th of May 1591, Dmitry was found dead in the Uglich Kremlin, and the circumstances of his death were unclear. He was only 8 years old. His throat was cut, and there were no witnesses. Russian chroniclers and later historians offered 3 possible scenarios of what could have happened. The first theory is that Dmitry was killed on the orders of Boris Godunov, with the murderers making the scene of the crime appear to look like an accident. This version of events was supported by a number of prominent 19th-century historians, such as Nikolai Karamzin, Sergei Solovyov, and Vasily Kluchevsky. However, critics of this version of events have pointed out that Dmitry was Ivan's son from what was at least his 6th and final marriage, and this marriage had not been blessed by the Orthodox Church, who considered only 3 consecutive marriages to be legitimate. Such circumstances could have discredited a potential claim of Dmitry's for the throne, and thus he was not a direct threat to Boris Godunov, and on this note, modern scholarship tends to exonerate Boris of any role in Dmitry's death. The second theory is that Dmitry managed to stab himself in the throat during an epileptic seizure, while playing with a knife. Such a theory was supported by historians such as Mikhail Pogodin, Sergei Platonov, and Ruslan Skrinyakov. The detractors of this scenario assert that since during an epileptic seizure the palms are wide open, the self-infliction of a fatal injury would be highly unlikely. The official investigation which was carried out at the time asserted that Dmitry's seizure came while he was either playing with a knife, or playing a game of swaika, a game in which a marlinspike is thrown to land in the middle of a metal ring placed on the ground at a distance. One way or another, it was believed that Dmitry turned towards himself while holding the knife or marlinspike and died due to a self-inflicted injury to the neck while falling forward during a seizure. A third theory which found support with some earlier historians was that Godunov's people had tried to assassinate Dmitry, but killed somebody else instead, which provided an opportunity for Dmitry to escape. Such a scenario explains the appearance of impostors, who were sponsored by the Polish nobility. However, most modern Russian historians consider the version of Dmitry's survival improbable, since it is hardly possible that the boy's appearance was unknown to his assassins. In Uglich on the 15th of May 1591, at 12 o'clock on Saturday, the cathedral watchman Maxim Kuznetsov and a widowed priest, by order of Dmitry's mother Maria Nagaya, sounded the alarm on the occasion of the death of Tsarevich Dmitry. The bells gathered the townspeople on the cathedral square. Maria and her brother, Mikhail, adhered to the version that Dmitry was stabbed to death, and they were vocal in their convictions. Their loud claims caused public outrage, not only due to the fact that a child had died, but as the last remaining Rurik heir who could have been able to challenge the regency and growing authority of Boris Godunov, the death was seen as far too much of a coincidence. A violent riot soon erupted, and enraged citizens lynched 15 of Dmitry's supposed assassins, including the local representative of the Moscow government and one of Dmitry's playmates. In the aftermath of the riots in Uglich, the government sent trusted people to the city to investigate and punish those responsible. The investigative commission was led by the eminent boyar and Prince Vasily Shoisky, who would many years later reign himself as Tsar Vasily IV. In the course of the investigation, up to 150 people were interrogated, including Maria Nagaya, witnesses, some representatives of the clergy, along with courtyard and posad people. After a thorough examination of witnesses, the investigative commission concluded that Dmitry had died from a self-inflicted stab wound to the throat. Following the investigation, Maria Nagaya would be punished for her role in instigating violence and was forcibly tonsured as a nun and exiled to a remote convent. However, later, after the political circumstances had changed, Shoisky retracted his earlier claim of accidental death and instead asserted that Dmitry was murdered on Boris Godunov's orders. Dmitry Ivanovich was laid to rest in the palace church in Uglich, and promptly, though temporarily, forgotten. With Dmitry's death, the Muscovite line of the Rurik dynasty was doomed to extinction, and although Tsar Feodor and his wife would have a daughter named Feodosia the following year in 1592, she would die in infancy less than 2 years later, and they would have no other children. At the end of 1597, Tsar Feodor I fell seriously ill and died on the 17th of January 1598, at 1 o'clock in the morning. With his death, the Muscovite line of the Rurik dynasty finally came to its anticipated end. Feodor was buried in the Archangel Cathedral together with his father and brother Ivan. The late Fyodor's now widowed wife Irina was initially suspected of having her own aspirations for the throne. However, she would voluntarily accept monasticism in a convent instead, removing her from contention. With this, an assembly of representatives of the nobility and clergy, the Zemsky subware, met on the 17th of February, and took into account, among other things, Irina's recommendation, before unanimously electing Fyodor's regent and Irina's brother Boris Godunov as the new Tsar 4 days later. Godunov was crowned on the 1st of September 1598, and the members of the Zemsky subware swore an oath of allegiance to him. The close quality that was characteristic of that time outweighed the distant kinship of the possible pretenders to the throne. No less important was the fact that Godunov had been ruling the country as regent on behalf of Fyodor and was not going to let go of power after the Tsar's death. Following the deaths of Dmitry and Fyodor, self-preservation as much as ambition led to Boris's rise to power. Had he not guaranteed his seat on the throne, the mildest treatment Godunov could have hoped for would have been a life of seclusion in a monastery. During the first years of his reign, he was both popular and prosperous, and ruled well. He recognized the need for Russia to catch up with the intellectual progress of the West, and he did his best to bring about educational and social reforms. He was the first Tsar to import foreign teachers on a large scale, the first Tsar to send young Russians to be educated abroad, and the first Tsar to allow Lutheran churches to be built in Russia. After the Swedish War of 1590 to 1595, he attempted to gain access to the Baltic Sea, and he also attempted to obtain Livonia by diplomatic means. Being the first non-Rurik Tsar, Godunov could not help but feel the precariousness of his position. He cultivated friendly relations with the Scandinavians and hoped to take a bride from a foreign royal house, thereby increasing the dignity of his own dynasty. In his suspiciousness, he began to settle personal scores with the boyars, and it would later come to disgrace and denunciations. Prince Mstislavsky and Vasily Shoisky, who both held potential claims to the throne due to the nobility of their families, were not allowed by Boris to marry, and in 1601, the Romanov boyars and their relatives suffered due to a false denunciation. The eldest of the Romanov brothers, Fyodor Romanov, the father of the first Romanov Tsar Michael I, was exiled to the monastery of St. Antonius and tonsured along with his wife, who was likewise exiled. As well as this, their son and future Tsar, Michael, was also exiled to a monastery. From the point of view of the people of that time, an elected monarch was not equal to the hereditary monarch, who became the ruler by the will of God, and not by the will of man. During his reign, Boris Godunov continued to be blamed for the death of tsarevich Dmitry, and as a result, the destroyer of the Tsar's root and the autocratic exalter of the throne. The real situation did not correspond to what was desired, and the boyar elite would not fail to take advantage of this. The earliest traces of the future impostor can be found around the year 1601 in Kiev, where he appeared in the form of a young monk who came to venerate shrines. It is believed that it was here that the future pretender made his first attempt to declare himself Tsarevich of Moscow. According to the Russian historian, romantic writer, poet and critic Nikolai Karamzin, the pretender pretended to be terminally ill and at confession revealed his royal origins. There is no reliable information to whether this is true, but according to the testimony of priest-monk Varlam Yitskoy, who did not believe the claims made by the impostor, the abbot of Kiev quite unequivocally showed the impostor the door. Following this, the impostor allegedly lived for a long time in the Holy Trinity Convent in Derman, which was then the possession of Prince Konstantin Ostrowski. At the time, the Holy Trinity Convent in Derman was host to a motley group of believers opposed to the Latin Rite, such as Orthodox, Calvinists, Trinitarians, and Arians. Later, in a letter to the Polish king dated March 3, 1604, Prince Konstantin Ostrowski denied acquaintance with the future pretender, from which conclusions can be drawn that the pretender either tried to open up to the prince and was cast out, or on the contrary, tried to behave as inconspicuously as possible and not to be seen. The second scenario may be more probable since the next stopping point for the pretender was the town of Hoshcha. While there, the pretender appeared to have discarded his monastic garb, and studied Latin and Polish for 2 years at the local Aryan school. In 1603, the young impostor appeared in the town of Bragin, which is situated in present-day Belarus. There the impostor entered the service of the Western Russian Prince Adam Wishniowiecki, to whom he showed himself to be a courteous, secretive, and reserved individual. There are several contradictory versions of how the impostor managed to convey to the prince the story that he was Tsarevich Dmitry, who had been saved by loyal boyars. According to one of them, the impostor fell ill or simply pretended to be sick and demanded a confessor. He allegedly revealed his royal name to the priest during confession and bequeathed after his death to Prince Adam Wishniowiecki the papers that were under his pillow, which were supposed to confirm his story. But the priest, without waiting for this, hurried to the prince and told him what he had heard, and the latter immediately demanded to see the paper. After studying them and supposedly making sure of their authenticity, Wishniowiecki hurried to the impostor and directly asked about his real name and origin. When confronted by the prince, the young man did not deny it and showed him a golden pectoral cross, allegedly given to him by his mother. In addition, a number of special signs served as a guarantee to the prince of the impostor's legitimacy, such as a large wart on the cheek, a birthmark above the hand and arms with different lengths. The prince, still unsure what to make of this story, paid for the best doctors, and eventually the false Dmitry was able to get back on his feet. It was in the town of Bragin where a defector from Moscow, who bore the surname Petrushka, arrived and assured the prince that he had once served in Uglich under Tsarevich Dmitry. Legend has it that the impostor immediately recognized Petrushka and addressed him, after which, casting aside all doubts, Wishniowiecki furnished the false Dmitry with a level of luxury appropriate to his position. However, according to a different version of events, the prince did not distinguish the false Dmitry from the crowd of servants, and on more than one occasion, the impostor had to feel the heavy and irascible character of the prince. Allegedly, the prince was angry with the impostor for being too sluggish and punched him in the face before cursing him with obscene words. The impostor could not endure such treatment and bitterly reproached the prince for not knowing against whom he had raised his hand, and in the process revealing his alleged true identity. As well as this, there is yet another version of events, in which the false Dmitry revealed himself not to Adam, but to Konstantin Wishniowiecki, a prominent military and statesman of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, when during a visit to the city of Sambir, which is situated in present-day Ukraine, and being part of Konstantin's retinue, he first saw his future wife Marina Miniszek, and inflamed with love for her and seeing no other way to achieve his goal of marrying her, he put a confession of his royal origin on a windowsill for her to read. Marina supposedly informed her father, the Polish nobleman and diplomat Jerzy Miniszek, of this revelation, who in turn allegedly informed Konstantin, and eventually the news that the rescued tsarevich had appeared in Poland became public knowledge. At the beginning of March 1604, the princes Adam and Michael Wishniowiecki, who had continued to take care of the impostor, brought him to the court of Sigismund III, King of Poland and Grand Duke of Lithuania, in Krakow. On the 15th of March, Sigismund granted the impostor a private audience in the presence of the Apostolic Nuncio to Poland, Claudio Rangoni, during which he privately recognized him as the heir to Ivan IV, assigned him an annual allowance, and allowed him to recruit volunteers on Polish territory. In response, The impostor promised to return half of the land of Smolensk together with the city of Smolensk to the Polish crown after his accession to the Russian throne. As well as this, to attract the powerful Jesuits to his cause, the false Dmitry publicly converted to Roman Catholicism on the 17th of April 1604, and convinced the papal nuncio, Claudio Rangoni, to also back his claim. Following his conversion to Catholicism, the impostor addressed the Pope of Rome with a letter promising favor and help, but apparently its style was so ambiguous that the promise could be interpreted either as a decision to convert Moscow to Catholicism, or simply a willingness to grant it freedom on an equal footing with other Christian denominations. Subsequently, both Konstantin Vishnevetsky and Jerzy Mniszek, the father of the impostor's aforementioned future wife Marina, triumphantly accompanied the impostor on his return to Sambir. Upon his arrival in the city, the false Dmitry made an official marriage proposal to Marina. The proposal was accepted, but it was decided to postpone the wedding until Dmitry's accession to the Moscow throne.